So recently, Turi got a new 3D printer, and one of the things we bought after getting the new 3D printer was some marble PLA. When he asked what I wanted to print with it, I sent him a very specific file. I sent him Buff Pikachu, because I really want to make a diorama with Buff Pikachu. So let's give it a try. I have a couple pieces printed out of 1/4 inch thick MDF. So this is the base plate. This is the tile area where the resin is going to fill in here. I scored these tile lines to act as a reference point for me because I'm going to use some foam to make some tiles. I'll be able to add these cracked effects to them if I make them out of foam and use the guide that I basically made myself here to glue them down. Then I have a circle base for Pikachu, and he'll sit right on top of it here. Then once he's glued in, we'll do all the weathering to him and be done with this, I guess. But yeah, let's get started.
I started by gluing the laser cut pieces together. I used super glue and E6000 craft glue with a few clamps. I made a template to cut the tiles out, and then I glued them in place. To cut the border out, I used my cutting mat to have consistent sized pieces. Once everything was glued down, I took some aluminum foil, crushed it into a ball, and used it to add some texture to the foam. I also used an X-Acto knife and a poker stick to add additional details. After finishing the details, I covered the surface with a homemade black Mod Podge, which is just black acrylic paint added to some standard matte Mod Podge. After the Mod Podge had finished drying, I dry brushed various gray acrylic paint shades onto the surface. Then I used some green paint to add some mossy areas. Now it was time to start on Pikachu. I started with a brown wash, applying it to his little bulgy body and wiping away the excess. From there I used a series of browns, greens, and grays to add highlights and shadows to his muscles. I looked at reference images of weathered statues to find where grime would accumulate on these statues if left outside over time. I think for my first dirty statue, this looks pretty solid. I then applied some Mod Podge to the circle base and added gravel as well as Woodland Scenic's fine turf. After Pikachu was nice and grimy, I started working on the pond area. I used Mod Podge to attach the sand to the base, and then put some watered down PVA glue to make sure everything was nice and stuck. Then I added some paint to the bottom and poured the resin. However, I messed up pretty bad. You see, I had some urethane casting resin laying around. I wanted to take advantage of the shorter cure time, but I didn't wait for my pond bed to dry all the way. Any moisture with urethane resin will cause extreme bubbling. Unfortunately, this was how I learned, because normally I only use this resin for dice or in clean molds. One positive that came out of this was that after I frantically removed all the resin from the base actually looked way more like a gross pond bottom. So I guess it could have gone worse. This time I decided to add the foliage before pouring the resin, so I had a little bit more control about where it ended up. Finally, before pouring the resin, I decided to put some black wash on the entire piece. Then it was time to pour the resin again, this time using a more forgiving epoxy resin. I colored the resin with acrylic model air paints and alcohol inks. When everything was cured, I put glossy Mod Podge on the water and blew it around with my airbrush to add the ripple effects. To finish everything off, I painted the plants and added some moss to Pikachu. Then he was done.